F Nighthawk Racing and the hashtag F1RT Championship. Firstly, I'm Sarah Hawkey. You can find myself and the rest of our drivers here on the Nighthawk Racing YouTube channel. You can also check out the entire back catalogue of seasons 1 to 3 of the F1 RST series, mini-series and off-championship events, and one-off race events, all of which are highly competitive and a lot of fun. Also, please check out our Instagram and TikTok for other content and races there. Link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen for more information. But now, it's time to focus on the event at hand. Tonight is round 4 of season 4, and in today's video we'll be covering the red lobby here at Suzuka. Before we get into tonight's race, I'm just going to give you a little bit more information about the event itself and the championship as a whole. So as you can see on screen at the moment is our calendar. We have a 10 race championship calendar going to several different tracks that GT7 has to offer. The racing itself will be divided into 2 lobbies, the red and the blue lobby. There are 2 racing events with a qualifying session, and the order of the events is the qualifying session comes up first. This sets a grid for the feature race. Next up is the sprint race, which is based on reverse average points scored, and then we go straight into the feature race, and like I said earlier, the qualifying session sets the grid for the feature race. So up first on the racing events of the night is the sprint race. This will be 9 laps long and 70% fuel. The grid is formed via how the drivers line up in the reverse average points scored across the season for a rolling start. Next up we have the feature race at 30 laps long. All drivers must use 2 different compounds of tyres in this race, whilst also starting on the grid on the compound that they set their fastest lap in qualifying earlier. And as a reminder, during the lobby tonight, in the blue lobby, drivers have full driver aids such as traction control, ASM and ABS. And in the red lobby, they only have ABS enabled on the driver aids. That hardcore driving experience to really challenge our drivers. So today we get the pleasure of driving around Suzuka, a track that we all know and love both in Gran Turismo and in real life as well for the events that it hosts. But talking about the track itself, it's 5.8 kilometres or just over 3.6 miles long with 17 turns in total, and it first appeared in GT4 and has been in every game since. We've had the pleasure of driving it since GT4, and like I say, we all know and love it. We get to drive it in the dry for the sprint race, but then in the feature race apparently we might have some wet weather, so that might be a little bit of fun. But it was designed as the Honda test track in 1962, and it's one of the only few real world circuits to have a figure of 8 layout. Obviously an example of that is also the Top Gear test track that luckily me and our co-founder Luke get the pleasure of driving with our job, but obviously due to the danger of an interesting track, it doesn't actually intersect with itself. Instead the back straight passes over the front section by means of an overpass. A little bit of an illusion there, but it's believed by many to be the most challenging and dangerous circuits in the world. Obviously it currently hosts the Formula 1 Japanese Grand Prix, and like I say, it's definitely one that we like watching on the calendar, although we have to wake up very early indeed to watch it. But talking about watching, let's go and watch the drivers in the sprint race and see how they got on in qualifying.
Okay, and welcome to the sprint grid for Suzuka round 4. So up first we have Sitterly in that Lexus RCF. Now we're going to be keeping an eye on him because he already has a blue podium to his name, so he'll be chasing another one here today. In P2 we have Nicky in that AMG, also with a blue podium, and we'll be chasing what he hopes will be another podium to add to that list. In P3 we have Kai, our Season 3 champion in that Nissan GTR. So far in the sprints he only has a fastest lap to his name, which is not what he'll be wanting. He'll definitely be wanting to add to the tally and then get towards the sharp end of the championship as well. And in P4 we have Charlie in that Ford GT, who is on a good run of form at the moment, especially in the sprint. Last week as he nabbed not only the fastest lap but the win, and then the feature race win as well. So keep an eye out for Charlie in that Ford GT. In P5 we have our very own commentator Kirk in that Viper. Keep an eye out for him. That Viper itself is a bit of a missile on the straight, and he already has a blue podium, so he's going to be wanting to add to that on the red side as well. But in P6 we have Sophie, who last week at Fuji took the red sprint win, so she is very, very quick and one to watch. And Sarah, can you do 7 downwards please?
Yeah, of course I can. So starting in P7 we have Jabril in the Ford GT as well, looking to pick up another big haul of points again this week. And just behind him in P8 we then have Giles, or Giggles as you may know him, in the RX Vision, the bright green RX Vision, and he has got a blue sprint win to his name, so obviously looking forward to trying to pick up another one. Obviously a bit harder starting in P8, but I wouldn't write him off just yet. But in P9 we then have Mercedes in that very bright year 1 Porsche 911, and he has got a red sprint podium. Again, obviously a bit of a challenge on his hands to get one here, but he's a very fast driver and doing quite well so far. But in P10 we then have Pedro in that BMW M6. Again, another challenging kind of race for Pedro in that BMW M6 around Suzuka, but let's see what he can do. In P11 we have Midnight ISO, the other half of Nighthawk Racing, and he is in the Mclaren 650S, and he has got a red sprint podium to his name. Again, I wouldn't write Midnight off, but starting P11 obviously he's got to work his way through the grid to get onto that podium. But starting in P12 and rounding off our sprint race, the grid, we have the Dark Lord in that Toyota Supra, very mean looking Supra may I add, and he has got a red sprint race win to his name. Obviously starting in P12 he's got the hardest challenge out of them all, and he's got to get past the likes of Midnight and Pedro first. But that's the grid for the sprint race. Let's go see how they all got on.
Welcome everybody, here we are for the sprint race here at Suzuka. We got 9 lap racing coming right up, with Siddeley starting on pole, with Nicky right behind him, and Kai in P3, Charlie in P4, and Kirk in P5. It's lights out, and away we go for the standing start here at Suzuka. Long run down into turn 1, as you can see, going to be a lovely 180-degree corner, as they're all going to get through, hopefully unscathed. Never mind, Charlie's after going on for a trip into the gravel, dropping a few positions there. Well, it looks like not much overtaking moves into that first corner. It looks like Pedro side by side with Jay Lambert, but unfortunately not getting the move done there. As you see, pretty clean so far. No incidents as of now, just a good bit of fighting in the back of the pack. But up in the front, here we've got Sophie and Giles side by side in true Dunlop. You see there's a big gaggle of cars here, all side by side. Can't really tell who's getting up positions right now, but I do know that Pedro's gotten up a few into P7. Dark Lord right behind, chased him down in that Supra. We've got Midnight side by side with the Ford GT driver as well. Up at the front, it looks like no change of position as of right now. We see Pedro on the inside of Dark Lord, not managing to get that move done, Dark Lord. He's just going to have to go through 200R now and follow Pedro.
Yeah, it's been a drama-filled first lap, I can say that for sure. At the back, there looked like there was a little bit of bump in between Sophie and Kirk, and Kirk came off a little bit worse, but he's still in with the fight in this little group here, which ranges all the way from P11 all the way down to P5 or Sophie. So, yeah, all of the drivers quite close to each other at the minute. and obviously we've got this kind of first little group in Italy, Nicky and Katie Kai. Mercedes just a little bit behind, but Katie Kai could be on for a good result here, Mac.
Yeah, definitely. Starting in that P3 position. Going to be a interesting one to watch as he climbs his way up into potentially first position. Was definitely having a look at Nicky on into 130R for a move on the Mercedes driver, and it looks like into turn one it will be the same situation. No move presenting itself yet, though, unfortunately. Actually, never mind. Later into turn one, does manage to get that move done on the inside, and that's now the outside as he does that switchback and manages to get ahead of the Mercedes driver, as Mercedes in the Porsche, not the Mercedes car, is now chasing down the Mercedes for P3 position as they head through the anti-bank curve now and into Dunlop. Oh, a bit of smoke being kicked up there. Possibly a bit of front bumper to rear bumper contact just into the Dunlop curve, but no moves coming as of it yet.
No, but what a brave move from Katie Kai that was in turn one. He was late on the brakes, and I think he caught Nicky a little bit by surprise there. But Sicily goes a little bit wide, which promotes Katie Kai into P1, or a little bump between Mercedes and Sicily, but Sicily back on the track. Yeah, Katie Kai already into P1 after 2 laps. I'm sure he'll be loving this clean air and try and break free from Nicky behind him in that Mercedes. But that promotes Mercedes up to P3 behind the Mercedes. I think we're going to say Mercedes quite a lot of times during this commentary. But Sophie as well being promoted up to P4. She's doing well so far. But we've still kind of got this gaggle of cars behind her, all ready and raring to take as many positions as they can, as we see Mercedes and Nicky about to fight into that 130R side by side. It's not important you really want to go side by side up, but they try it. Nicky goes a little bit wide. Sophie on the scene goes for the middle. Oh, they come together. Ooh. Nicky coming out worse there, being hit into the barrier, and that is him off of the podium and at the back of the grid, I believe.
Big contact there. Engine damage for the Mercedes driver. That is not a good outcome to that 3-wide move. Unfortunately, just can't go 3 wide through much of the sections of this track, to be honest. And especially on 130R, going into Castro Triangle, just not going to be able to make that work, unfortunately. And as you said, Nicky, unfortunately, coming off worse in that instance. We see Sophie having a bit of an excursion there off in turn one. As the field, I thought the field by now would have been a bit settled, but it looks like we're still having these battles, which is good to see. But we usually see in these sprint races the field start to settle down after a few laps sometimes, and then towards the end there's a big push to get positions. But now it does look like there is still a lot of fighting going on through the fields. Midnight right behind Sicily here. McLaren versus the Lexus, heading into Degner 1 now. Just no moves coming right now for the McLaren driver, but I'm sure we will see an overtake pretty soon. Does look like he's right on the gearbox of that Lexus. They head now into the hairpin.
Talking about gearboxes, it looked like Jabril managed to gain a little bit of time on Midnight and Sicily there, with them two holding each other up. So Jabril could be in with the fight in these next few corners. Obviously, the 4GT is a very fast car on the straight, but it just seems on those, kind of very long corners, it just can't keep up with the kind of the mid cars of the McLaren and the Lexus. But I think we'll see a move here from Midnight on Sicily. He goes to the inside line, attempting that side-by-side move into 130R again. Who's going to break? Oh, Sicily breaks a lot earlier, letting Midnight through. That was, I think, he wanted to choose life there, I think, Sicily. Maybe he looked at that incident the lap before and thought, I choose life. So well done, Sicily there. They both managed to get through that last few corners and no damage. But again, talking about gearboxes, got Pedro quite close to the rear of that very mean Supra of Dark Lord, and already, Dark Lord being gifted a lot of positions and up to P3, obviously starting quite far near the back of the grid. So I'm sure he'll be happy with P3 currently, Mac.
Yeah, definitely. BMW driver doing very well here and chasing down Dark Lord as well. We saw them fighting earlier on in the race, but it does look like Pedro's gotten this a little bit of pace back towards the middle/end stage of this race, and is now catching up to the Supra driver, and looks to be on for a podium for this sprint race. So definitely it would be a good close to the sprint race if you can get this result. And you see there just cutting the grass right there, a bit of grass being kicked up from the BMW driver as we head now into the hairpin once again. Lovely corner this. It's probably one of the heaviest braking zones on the tracks. As that first corner, of course, you do carry quite a lot of speed into there. So it is a lovely corner. I'd say probably this one in Casio Triangle, the heavier braking zones. Already seen an instant into the heavy braking zone at Casio Triangle. We're now looking at Giles chasing down a 4GT driver and certainly in front.
I was going to ask you about Giles. He's the only driver to start on the soft tyres. Everyone else has gone for mediums for that kind of longevity. Because I'm not sure if the softs will last the 9 laps, because they seem to kind of burn through quite easily on these tracks. So Giles, although he's having obviously a quiet race at the minute, he's not too far away from City and Jabril. I'm not sure if these soft tyres are gonna last for him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've seen.
He makes the move. Oh, that was very close. A little bit of a tap to Jabril. Sorry there, Max. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, we just see that move, late braking move from the RX-7 driver. Of course, I think one of the only RX-7 drivers in this lobby. So interesting to see that. We had a few of those last season, but kind of died out a small bit, especially with the new BOP changes. But yeah, as you mentioned, I think softs definitely not going to make it to the end of the race. You can already see the wear more than half on some of the tyres for Giles' car, and it's going to be tough to get those softs at the end of the race. We've seen that you can no longer run them straight down to fully red. You can see that tyre indicator right there. He's got about half red, but you can't run it down all the way anymore with these new physics. Unfortunately, just not possible. Around 20% wear, you really start to lose tyre grip. So I'd say maybe not the right call for this track. Maybe a different track like High Speed Ring. Definitely the right call, but unfortunately not here.
Maybe testing out for some of the future tracks in the calendar. But like you say, obviously he's got to make the move stick now, because later on in the race he may struggle a little bit with those tyre physics, like you say. But going back up to the podium position of Dark Lord, he seems to have created a little bit of gap between himself and Pedro. But Kirk has managed to overtake Sophie here, so maybe Sophie making a potential mistake or a missed move on the hairpin there. But it's good to see Kirk back up to P5, obviously having a bit of a challenging first lap. But he's made it work on lap 5. But yeah, like you say, everyone seems to be quite close to each other at the moment. Gaps are starting to form, but yeah, all the drivers kind of fighting for points. Obviously, nearly halfway through the season. It's obviously this point where you're going to want as many points as you can kind of pick up in the sprint in the future. And a little birdie has told me it's going to be quite dark and quite wet in the feature race. So I'm sure the drivers are trying their best to kind of get that, that dry running in, because they know in the feature race it's going to be a very different story, shall we say.
Yeah, definitely. You usually see drivers sometimes using the sprint race to test out, the car, the strategy for the feature race. But as you mentioned, not going to be the case here this weekend, because of the fact that it's going to be potentially, let's just say, doom and gloom conditions with some rain, as we see a bit of an off there for one of the drivers, I think Charlie, in turn 1. But let me just point out as well, actually, just shout out to Kirk in the Viper right now, especially with the changes the Viper has gotten in these last few updates. I have to say, doing really well with the tyre wear and the fuel conservation in that car. It's never been the best. I've always, I'm a big fan of that car. Whenever I've driven it, it's a fast car, but my God, does it burn through everything. But he seems to be conserving those tyres and that fuel very well for these sprint races.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you there. It's a very difficult car to drive, so all credit to Kirk for picking it and managing to try and get the best results he can out of it. Although it does look like Sophie potentially only went for a move there, but just couldn't put the power down, so Kirk is still in front. But yeah, big shout out to Kirk. He seems to be doing well, so hopefully he can do just as well in the feature race. But it looks like Dark Lord is closing up on Mercedes now, so maybe the Porsche driver, sensing that he's got the Dark Lord behind him and we all know that we don't really want the Dark Lord behind us because of how super quick he is, and I'm sure he wants to try his best in these closing stages to chase down Cade the Kai. So I'm sensing probably maybe a move in the next lap or so on Mercedes by Dark Lord.
Jabril and Juz side by side here now, heading into 130R. We saw Juz get past Jabril early on this race, but I'd say Juz tires starting to fade now as into 130R on the inside. Jabril managed to get the move done, but heads onto the AstroTurf and loses that position once again. But Juz maybe outbreaking himself a small bit, but and now Jabril on the outside, but not managing to get that move, unfortunately. Had that inside line for that final curve, but unfortunately just not getting the run that he wanted to get past Juz once again. But Juz will be struggling with these tires over these last 3 laps to see if there's any moves on soon.
Yeah, because obviously, like you see with the tyres just now, he's got about a quarter left, and obviously we've got 2 laps left, so it's going to be tricky on that final lap especially. So I'm sure obviously Jabril will keep that in mind and maybe go for a move potentially. But just obviously going back to Nicky, he is still running. He's been repaired that engine damage, and he's trying his best to try and catch the group, although he's a little bit too far behind, but hopefully in the future race he has some better luck, shall we say. But Jabril on the inside, Giles on the inside of this corner now, side by side through here. Jabril going slightly wide, but Giles out in front still. But like you said, Mac, obviously he's going to be really struggling with these tyres. So potentially it's kind of, do you fight? Do you burn through those tyres just a little bit more, or do you concede the position to Jabril?
I mean, if you play your strategy well, depending on how much of a defensive driver you are, you can definitely help that tyre disadvantage play to your hand. For example, let's say you might take a bit of extra time on the corner exits, really get them backed up out of those corners, and just take off like a rocket when you can. You can definitely use a few defensive moves to help conserve tyre life, but also stop the guy behind you from getting past. But it really takes skill, so we'll have to see if Juz can get that done. As we see Sophie making a move on Kirk there into the Castillo triangle. I managed to get the move done. The 458 driver up into P5 now, but Kirk may have a run here with Slipstream on the straight again. We'll be catching that Ferrari driver, and on the outside now into the first corner. Just Sophie having that inside line, not managing to get the move done, but we'll have another opportunity here, but not getting that move, unfortunately. We see now Giles and Jabril side by side heading into the first curve, just like Sophie and Kirk a moment to go, as we see Giles managing to fend off, just like Sophie did on that inside line. So pretty much mirror image of the 2 overtakes, or the 2 defensive moves there.
Yeah, like you say, obviously he seems to be defending quite well from Jabril at the minute. Obviously with that tyre wear, it is quite impressive. But obviously we can see that Jabril is just a little bit probably more confident. It's not going around some of these corners, but the tyre wear might be an explanation for that. But yeah, Giles doing a pretty good job, although Jabril is right on the bumper of that RX Vision now, braking slightly earlier than Giles here. But going back up, obviously we've got Midnight that's closing in on Kirk now, who nearly lost the rear end there. But yeah, obviously the Viper and the Ferrari, they, like you said earlier, they are quite gas guzzling and kind of burn through their tyres, but they seem to be doing quite well at the moment. And Mercedes still holding off the Dark Lord, although the Dark Lord trying to get the power down early, trying to get that move done. But Pedro's got front row tickets to this at the minute. Quickly go back to Jabril and Giles. Again, still where we left it, Giles in front, although Jabril goes for the inside line. He's putting the power down a little bit earlier. A lot of curb there by Jabril. Obviously, I think that unsettled that 4GT just a little bit, so it's brought Giles back into the action. Maybe we might see them going side by side on 130R here, Mac.
Yeah, definitely. Giles' tyres are definitely starting to wear out. You can see nearly down to 0% tyre, or 100% tyre wear on those fronts, and you can see it's really being shown there as he heads onto the Astro in the grass, just understeering out of 130R. Still managing to keep Charlie behind, but is doing a good effort right now to keep the fight on between Jabril and Charlie. You can see on the inside there's Charlie heading on to the gravel, after being just maybe a bit forced wide by Giles, but Giles will stay in P9 and Charlie will drop to P11 with Sicily up into P10 there after that incident. As we look back up to the front now, we got a battle brewing between Pedro and Dark Lord on this final lap. The BMW versus the Toyota. As we head into the left-hander, coming up into Degner 1. Nothing coming of it yet. Pedro biding his time, potentially will get a run into 130 or even potentially out of 200 or. Mercedes out in front in the Porsche. As we head now into the hairpin. See if Pedro tries to make a move, but just too far back right now.
Yeah, Mercedes getting a great line out of that hairpin there, managing to create a little bit of a bigger gap between himself and the Dark Lord here. So Mercedes doing an excellent job so far during this sprint race. But obviously Pedro hot on the Dark Lord's tail. So the BMW might struggle around here with these long corners. Oh, as Pedro goes drifting around that spoon corner there. Looked quite impressive, but probably didn't help putting the power down. But yeah, obviously I think Pedro struggling with that BMW just a little bit. But he's keeping with the Dark Lord. Again, quite impressive. But we're going on to the final corners if you want to take it away, Mac. Oh,
yeah, definitely. As we see Pedro launching it down the inside. Will he manage to make a stick? The BMW driver on the outside now as Dark Lord headed onto the AstroTurf. Dark Lord is not going to be able to keep that position. Pedro's going to get P3 with Mercedes in front in P2. Kai P1, Dark Lord P4, Sophie P6, I believe. Sorry, P5, Kurt P6, Midnight P7. We see Jabril is going to cross the line soon in P8, finishing ahead of Giles, who of course tyres went at the end, who's now unfortunately in P11 due to that. We see Charlie coming across the line P9 after re-overtaking Stichley, who comes home in P10. And we see Nicky, unfortunately, after having that clash earlier on in the race, coming home in P12 after getting very bad engine damage, of course, in that big incident that happened out of 130 or.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree about that, Mac, but it all seemed to kind of heat up in that final lap, especially making our job a little bit harder to kind of spot everything. But obviously Pedro making a very late move from Dark Lord and manages to get it done in that final corner where it counted. But yeah, obviously good to see everyone running still, although, you know, Nicky being kind of with that engine damage couldn't really kind of get anything from the sprint race. Maybe hopefully he took a little bit of practice, you know. I know it's a hard job trying to get back into the pack, so hopefully he took the time to kind of get ready for the feature race and the qualifying, obviously. But yeah, I think everyone did a pretty good job, and obviously, like you referred to earlier, it's how the drivers are going to drive in that doom and gloom. But who would you say kind of took the spotlight in that race there, Mac?
I do want to say that Pedro displayed some incredible driving. Of course, overtaking Dark Lord there at the final, well, not the final corner, but I like to say it's the final corner because, I mean, the last curve was kind of just flat out all the way. So the final, you know, braking zone on the track, carrying out brilliant move on Dark Lord. But I have to say, to be honest, there was a lot of good drivers in that race. We saw Mercedes, like, it's kind of unfair because you know, Mercedes led a quiet race as well in P2 and just kept everything clean, and so did Kai as well. Quiet race. We didn't go up to Kai that often. I think there's a few standout drivers in the sprint race, but I think the race that really matters now is the feature where we really see the driver's skill put to the test in these, well, doom and gloom conditions, as I said, but these very tricky conditions that are going to be coming up.
Yeah, we've not quite kind of seen it in the Nighthawk Racing Championship so far. So, like you say, it's kind of first how the drivers get on with it, if they like it, but most importantly, if they survive it, which we've got our fingers crossed that they will. But let's go see where everyone qualified and then get into the doom and gloom. Okay, so before we get into the feature race of tonight, let's have a quick little look at the qualifying results. Obviously, this sets the grid up for the feature race, and a little birdie has told me it might get a little bit wet and it might also get a bit dark, so it's a challenging race for the drivers ahead. But nevertheless, let's get into the grid. Starting on pole is Katie Dekai with an astonishing time of a 158.005. So close, and within touching distance of that 157, which I think would have blown all the other drivers out of the park. But starting only 6 tenths back, we have Pedro in that BMW M6 looking for a good feature race today. Obviously picking up a big haul of points, hopefully, for his team in Innate Motorsports. But in P3 we have Sophie in that fast Ferrari 458, time of a 158.759, so not too far away from beating Pedro's time. In P4 we have the Dark Lord in that very mean Supra that I mentioned earlier. It's going to look even meaner in the dark, I reckon. But he's starting with a time of a 159.057. And just behind him we have Mercedes in that Porsche 911 with a 159.497. And before I pass you over to Midnight, we have Midnight in P6 with a 159.504 in that McLaren. So again, very close, only literally a few thousandths off Mercedes time. So just going to show you how close the top 6 really are. But I'm going to pass you over to Midnight, who will talk about the rest of the grid.
Spot on, thank you very much, Sarah. That pole lap time from Katie Dekai is absolutely astonishing. So it can only mean that he's a threat for the race there, for the race win. So good luck to him out there. But let's move on. So in P7, in that Viper, we have Kirk on a 159.7, and we can only feel there was more to come from him in that session. But that's just the way qualifying goes sometimes. But he will be looking for a strong race, hopefully. In P8 we have Jabril in that 4GT on a 159.8, doing very well to wrestle that time out of the 4GT, and he's always a good person to watch during the race, so keep an eye on him. In P9 we have Giggles in the RX Vision, otherwise known as Giles, on a 2-minute flat, basically 2 minutes 0.1. So we'll keep an eye out for Giles there. He has a blue victory this season. He's going to be wanting to try and replicate the same in the red lobby here tonight. In P10 we have Nikki in that AMG, only 3 tenths off Giles, so that might be a battle brewing between those two for the race, on a 2 minutes 0.4. In P11 we have Sicily on a 2 minutes 5.2, followed by Charlie on a 2 minutes and 6 seconds 0.1. Can only feel that those two had more to give in that qualifying session. Maybe they were caught up in traffic or had bad laps or laps deleted. Unfortunate for the pair there, but let us hope that they can provide us with some really entertaining racing here at Suzuka. So, Sarah, anyone you've got a particular eye on for this race?
I feel like don't underestimate kind of the people starting from kind of 6 downwards, because obviously this is a very challenging race that's ahead of them. Obviously they've got a little bit more insight into that radar. They can see the weather patterns arriving or moving away from the track. So obviously it's going to be a very kind of strategic race in a way. Obviously pitting for the right tyres at the right time. So it could be literally anyone's game here. Obviously some people that might prefer driving in the wet might kind of excel in this race, so they've got that added kind of challenge of the darkness that will kind of come upon them in that kind of second half of the race. So I really think it's going to be the first half of the race where it's going to be important to climb up as many positions as possible, and then obviously going into the dark it's about kind of trying to survive and trying to stay on track. I know it's obviously a lot harder, but I'm excited to see how everyone gets on, really. And obviously if they can rise to the challenge.
Yeah, quite agree. From a personal point of view, I think always keep an eye on Katie Dekai, who's our season 3 champion for good reason, and that qualifying lap was unreal. Pedro himself always... We know the race is going to be wet, at least to start with, and Pedro's always done well in the wet races, so keep an eye on him. And the same goes for Sophie, so our top 3 are definitely going to be a massive threat for the victory here. But the last 2 people I'd say keep an eye on without a question are Mercedes X50 and Jabril. Jabril showed very, very well in our non-championship event for the wet series over the winter break, and Mercedes has been nothing but outstanding so far this season. So lots to keep an eye on in this race, and I think it's going to give the commentators a lot to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that. They'll probably make our job that little bit harder to kind of commentate and everything, but I think that leads us perfectly on to passing over to the commentary team and seeing if they rise to the challenge or let the chaos unfold.
Chaos and the darkness and wet racing in Suzuka.
Yeah, I feel like the Dark Lord might have a little bit of an advantage here, because obviously, you know, the Dark Lord, nighttime.
I see.
Yeah, I see you, Dark Lord.
Might use his Sith powers to guide himself at night.
Yeah, or kind of yeet everyone out of the way, but we shall see.
All things to be discovered. So over to the commentary team for the feature race here at Suzuka round 4.
Yeah, let's do it.
Welcome back, guys. Here we are for the feature race in, well, I said it, doom and gloom weather. Torrential rain here at the Suzuka circuit here in Japan. It's lights out and away we go. Pedro starting in P2 and Kai in first, and the grid is immediately jumped up as people have gotten terrible traction or really good traction off the line. We see a complete jumble of positions as the Ferrari 458 of Sophie is in P1 already, even before turn 1. Dark Lord in P2, Kai in P3, and Jabril making a brilliant start up in P4 as well. Pedro from P2 is dropped to P6. The BMW M6 not getting the best launch off the line. Heading through the S's now. Treacherous conditions. You can see the spray being kicked up by the cars here as the lights from the cars can be seen just trailing their way through Snake and through the anti-bank curve. Heading through Dunlop now. No spins so far, which is always good to see because it's very easy to spin in Dunlop, even in the dry. So in the wet, must be so much worse. We see now, heading into Degner 1, no other change of position apart from the launch off the lines. We see Charlie heading off into the gravel. Just in P11 right there. I thought he was coming in with some rate of speed there. I thought he was heading off into the barriers, but the gravel slowing him down fairly quick enough. We see now the grade after settling down. I'd say that changes off the line was probably the different traction of the different cars. I know that, for example, you got the Porsche, which doesn't really get the best starts. Then you've got cars like the Mercedes, which will have a lot better traction off the line. Of course, no traction control in these lobbies as well, so the drivers will have to control those starts by themselves. We see Dark Lord fighting here with Jabril. The 4GT really coming alive in these wet conditions onto the back stretch now. Just see Dark Lord spinning those tyres, lighting up the rears as the aquaplaning is really bad for some of these guys. Interesting first lap there, Sarah. We saw a lot of change position even before turn 1.
Yeah, you did a fantastic job of keeping track of all of that. I think my mind, when I was on board with Midnight, he got engulfed by like literally everybody. So I was just watching that and thinking, oh my god, doing this without any traction control. As it seems, Kirk had a little bit of a tangling together with Mercedes, both surviving that Casio triangle. But yeah, obviously, oh no, Kirk accidentally spinning into the pits, but we've had a move by Nicky on Midnight there. It looks like City might be also going for a move on Midnight here, so potentially Midnight maybe struggling putting power down in that the McLaren. But yeah, it seems like we've got an interesting kind of grid so far. Some people with great traction in the wet, like the 458 of Sophie, who's doing an excellent job so far. And Jabril, obviously, we did have that wet series that Ziggy held over the winter, and Jabril seemed to really kind of come alive in that 4GT. So maybe using some experience from that again here at Suzuka. But obviously, Mercedes hot on the tail of Dark Lord again. Seeing the Spirit race is the opposite way round. But yeah, a very busy first couple of laps.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm sure it's only going to get busier from here as the conditions change and positions swap as we see Mercedes around the outside into Dagner 1 manages to get the move done on Dark Lord. Brilliant move there. Very risky going around the outside. You're really trusting that driver on the inside of Dagner 1, but a fantastic move getting up into P4. You see Pedro now also starting to pounce on Dark Lord. Dark Lord struggling a bit maybe in these conditions in that Supra. Of course, certain cars in these wet conditions are going to be a bit harder to handle than the others. I know that the Mercedes, from personal experience, is a really balanced, beautiful car in the wet conditions, whereas some other cars, such as the 07 and the Viper, may not be the best to handle, especially because I know the Viper, a lot of power in that thing. Be really easy to spin up the rears and have a spin. As you see Pedro now heading onto the backstretch, Dark Lord and Pedro wheel spin out of that corner. You can really see the drivers struggling for traction in these wet conditions, as Kai had to serve a penalty there. He's been allowed to really catch up a small bit, but he had a gap anyways, so just shortening the gap a small bit, but nowhere near an overtake. Mercedes really starting to mount a threat on the 4GT driver in P3.
Yeah, Mercedes seems to be doing really well in these wet conditions. Oh, Kaden the Kai is in the gravel. Our sprint race winner is in the gravel currently. He's managing to get himself out just behind Charlie here. He might also just come out just in front of Kirk. But yeah, we'll see a rare mistake by Kaden the Kai there in that GTR. But going back up, we've got Giles potentially going for a move on Sicily here into that first corner. Letting both surviving that, although Midnight went slightly wide and does well to keep that McLaren back on track. A little bit of contact between Giles and Sicily there, forcing Sicily out wide. But yeah, obviously Pedro still on the tail of the dark board. Yeah, I've got to say I'm very impressed with obviously P2 and P3 in Jabril and Mercedes so far. They seem to be doing quite well and handling those cars excellent, like perfectly in these wet conditions, along with Sophie as well. She seems to be kind of in her own little world here, enjoying these doom and gloom conditions, as you call them.
Yes, I have to say, Sophie's doing excellent. Got a lovely gap up front, maintaining that from Jabril, especially in the 458. Trust me, like, I've driven the 458 before. I hated that car in the dry. And I mean, controlling that car in these torrential wet conditions, I mean, that is some skill right there. And really showing that the driver skill plays a massive factor into these wet races. And you can really see some drivers come alive under these conditions where the car is not limiting them. And it's all based on driver skill in these different conditions that they wouldn't have experienced before, and adapting to that is definitely where you see some really good performances. You see Midnight in P6 defending from the Mercedes of Nicky and the 4GT of Charlie. Heading through now is Charlie, you can see just ghosting a small bit there, but coming back on track, maybe it's a bit of a technical glitch, but luckily everybody on the track, everybody's safe, we're all good.
I was going to say, Charlie looked like he was coming in as a missile then, but maybe potentially a little bit of lag happened there for Charlie, because that looked definitely interesting. But Midnight also making a move on Nicky around that spoon corner or just before was quite a brave move. Obviously, he had to keep the power down, and putting the power down in any of these cars, especially in these conditions, it's a bit sketchy, shall we say. But obviously, Pedro getting a little bit rear end happy in that BMW coming over the final corners. We'll lose him just a tiny bit of time to Dark Lord here and Midnight. He's kind of in no man's land between the two at the minute. But we might have a move by Charlie on Nicky here, potentially into turn one. Charlie braking a lot later than Nicky there, and just looks like he's gone a little bit wide. So did Pedro as well. I just managed to catch that. Pedro going slightly wide. And Midnight now hot on the tails of Pedro.
I think Charlie might have spun round in turn one. Unfortunately, was making a move there on Nicky and just having a bit of a spin. I was going to say the 4GT drivers were looking very strong here. Just before that spin, Charlie was getting up positions, and of course we have Jabril up front maintaining that P2 and is also pulling that gap for Mercedes. We saw Mercedes mounting quite the challenge on the 4GT driver. But it seems now that challenge just after fading away really, and Mercedes dropping back from the 4GT drivers. So Jabril now in a bit of a safe zone where he can focus on just maintaining that gap and his fuel and tires for the rest of this race. Now my question would be, something that I'm quite curious about, is whether we are going to have to make pit stops for fuel, but whether they'll have to change tires at all. We'll have to see if the conditions lighten up at all during the race, get onto inters at some point. But given the current weather forecast, I'm assuming not.
Yeah, it does definitely does look very rainy, so I'm not sure. We may potentially see some inters at some point, because that's a good point you raised there. All the drivers starting on the wet tyres, maybe for a little bit more kind of confidence in the cars that they can potentially put the power down just that little bit earlier, or they just want as much traction as they can as possible without actually traction control. So yeah, obviously no one braving the inters just yet, but like you say, the weather may blow away from the track a little bit and give the drivers a little bit of relief, but it will be getting dark soon. So if we get this level of rain in the dark, it's going to be even harder for the drivers. As we see a late braking move by Katie Kai on the outside, now the inside of this Casio triangle here, side by side, but Katie Kai gets that move done. A beautiful bit of racing between the two there, giving each other plenty of room and a lot of respect.
As we see now, all the drivers starting to settle down into this feature race. We always see this after the first few laps of the overtakes. Drivers manage to pull gaps from each other, and now it's the patience game. Keep your car on the road, keep your fuel and your tires in check, and then we'll see, once the next round of pit stops come, we'll see more position spots. But of course, we're going to see plenty of moves before then, but this is where the kind of main action dies down for a bit until those next pit stops are made. We see, just want to point out, I think Jaws has gotten damaged somewhere. I don't know where that's happened. Maybe an incident on the first lap at some point. But it'll be interesting to see if that damage is affecting him, because he, of course, is after getting overtaken by Kirk in 10. But Kirk also has that front damage from an incident earlier. It seems not really affecting him, because Kirk is catching up to driver in P9. So we'll see how he manages for the rest of this race.
Yeah, maybe obviously these conditions, getting damaged, probably might not affect you as much in the dry, obviously, with kind of that slipstream and stuff like that. It seems Kirk's is handling that damage, so is Giles at the moment. They're kind of relatively matched on pace at the minute, but if it dries up, we shall see. They might have to add that into their kind of strategic calls, but yeah, it looks like it's still heavily raining out here. Katie Decline now on the back of Midnight in that McLaren. After that small mistake that Katie Decline made, he's definitely wanting to. Oh, as I said, that he nearly lost the rear end of that GTR here. So he'll have to wait to make that move on Midnight for a few more corners.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, really, to be honest, because you took the words right out of my mouth, was about the damage and stuff. I was thinking, I don't think the damage will affect the drivers as much in this race, because you mainly just lose straight line speed and a bit of downforce with the damage in this game, and I think the straight line speed probably won't be of an issue, considering how speed is affected with these wet conditions. Of course, you don't get to top speed, and downforce does affect that top speed of the cars, so I don't think they're going to be reaching that unless it goes dry anytime soon, which I don't see happening for a good while.
Or unless we see another kind of missile mission by Charlie, maybe potentially hitting max speed in that 4GT, we shall see. But interestingly enough, we've got our first pit stop in Sicily. He's refueled. I'm not sure if he took on another set of tyres, but he's come out in P12, and he's gone for I think he's gone for the intermediates, so he's chancing his arm, maybe potentially seeing something on the radar that we can't. He's gone for he's the first runner on the intermediate tyres, Mac. To be fair, it does look like it's brightened up a little bit around the track. But I'm not sure if the rain, it doesn't look as heavy, so maybe Sicily just chancing his arm there, kind of seeing how he gets on. And I'm sure the other drivers around him will also be seeing how he gets on, so they can kind of either copy him or stay on the wet just that little bit longer.
Oh, as we see Midnight having a bit of clout with the wall there, picking up probably a puddle, I'd say, and just hitting the wall, and now his front right damage. That's not going to be good for the McLaren driver's race. But as you mentioned, I was going to mention the bottom left you can see on your screen there is basically just a measure of how much water, standing water, there is on the track, and once he gets between that little first increment and a second one, that's usually about interconditions. So I think Sitterly might have seen that and said, maybe there isn't not much rain forecast on the radar. Might try to get a bit of a temporary benefit from the interspeed and maybe get fastest lap as well, and hopefully ride it out if there's no rain to come back. But I will have to see on that, because of course it could be no rain on the radar right now, but 5 laps ahead will be a completely different story. As we've seen Midnight and Jaws now taking the gamble. Of course, both of those drivers have damage, so I'd say that is not only in response to Sitterly pitting for inters, but also saying we might as well try this considering we have damage.
Yep, exactly that. It might obviously burn them a little bit of time in the pits repairing that damage, and crucially, obviously, after they pit, not trying to pick up any more damage. But yeah, obviously, they've took the gamble as well. Sitterly, you know, still running, hasn't picked any damage in that last lap. So, like you said, it might be time to go on those intermediates with that, you know, the moisture bar on the left-hand side. Although Sitterly does go a little bit wide there out of turn 1, so maybe braking just that little bit later, pushing the limit, shall we say, around the track. But interesting enough, it is getting darker, obviously, so the drivers are going to start to probably struggle with a little bit of vision here. But we've got the Dark Lord in front of this little group here. But I'm sure Pedro's probably feeling a little bit of pressure now, being in a little bit of a sandwich between Katie Nakai and the Dark Lord here. He probably doesn't want to make any mistakes in that BMW at the minute. But yeah, interesting little group we have here from P4 down to P6.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's a fine art what the drivers of Giles, Sitterly and Midnight will be doing here, is because the fact that they can't go too wide because there'll be a lot of standing water, which won't be interconditions. They can't go too far into the corner because there'll be standing water. So it's very much you have to follow the racing line when you're on those inters. And if you don't, you're going to end up losing more time than the wet drivers. But if you do, you're going to end up gaining more time. So very much there cannot be any mistakes over these next few laps from these drivers if they want to get some pace against the current wet tire drivers.
Talking about mistakes there, Mac, we had Dark Lord going just maybe potentially braking a little bit late for that Casio triangle, and he loses 2 positions to Pedro and Katie Nakai here. He's looking like he's trying to put some moisture on those wet tyres. So the rain has stopped, so the wet runners are going to struggle in this next lap as Pedro and the Dark Lord goes wide here. Katie Nakai now in front of this little group here. So I think, you know, Midnight, Giles and Sitterly were on something there. They called, obviously, the rain stopping at the perfect time, and now we're going to see the wet tyre runners struggle a little bit in this next lap or so.
Well, the question is, how much time can those intermediate drivers gain? Did they pit the right time, or did they pit too early? Because just because it means the water is between that region doesn't mean that if you go slightly wide into a certain corner, or if you just go into a certain corner, that it's going to be the same conditions as the previous corner. Of course, the track, it dynamically dries, so I mean, some parts of the track will still be wet conditions, some would be interest. We'll see now where the drivers come out. We see Kirk coming up behind Midnight. Kirk's on slicks. Kirk's on mediums right now. Okay, so we now have 3 levels of drivers. We have the ones that are adamant and still full wet. We've got the drivers who are on intros. Then we've got bad lads like Kirk on mediums. Okay.
That is very bold. That is a very bold move. Obviously, we can see even here coming out of Spoon, that complete left-hand side is still wet. And we had a little bit of a change to the lead there. Jabril temporarily getting in the lead, potentially going for the lead again here on the wet patch, trying to pull down those tyres. And you can just see the speed of that 4GT just managing to blast past Sophie here, although it might go on a bit wide here. They reclaims the lead, but yeah, a brave move by Kirk, potentially. Obviously, it might be a tad too early, or it could be the, you know, the most genius tyre choice ever. But we shall see, obviously, how he gets on in the next lap or so. But even we see Jabril and Sophie here trying to cool down their wet tyres. They're not wanting to pit for those intermediates yet, so maybe potentially there might be a new kind of front of weapon we might see shortly. As Jabril goes wide, Sophie's still remaining on the track, so she looks like she's going to reclaim the lead. And we'll back to how it was a few laps ago with Sophie in the lead and Jabril just behind her.
The worry for the wet weather tire drivers right now, basically, is if it stays dry for too long. You can see, right, Dark Lord's tires and Pedro's and everyone who's currently on these full wets, their tire wear is horrendous. We saw at the start of the race, we saw Sophie 5 laps in, barely any tire wear. But the dry weather wears these wet tires terribly. You can see there, Sophie nearly has half wear on that front left. Whereas laps before, she had basically none. So it's a case of if it keeps dry for now, then tires are going to run out. So even if it was to go back to wet weather conditions, they won't have any grip because they'll have no tire tread left. So if they need to pit anyways, if it stays dry for another 2 laps, they're going to need to pit anyways because even if it stays wet, they're going to have no grip left. So this may be a good strategy from the Inter drivers. Get the most pace out of the current conditions and then pit again for the wet. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, this is going to be crucial time, especially for those wet tyre runners. It's going to be crucial to make the best decision at the right time. Even thinking about, obviously, Dark Lord going a little bit wide there, but he picks up a 3-second penalty. Might be for a pit lane infringement there. But going on board with Midnight, obviously he pitted a few laps ago for the intermediate tyres, and you can already see they're a quarter worn. So maybe, just maybe, Kirk, obviously who's just made a move on Citily, might have made the best call possible, you know, staying on the wets just a lap longer, and obviously he's managing quite well on those mediums at the moment. So interesting stuff from Kirk, but maybe kind of a masterclass at the moment.
Yeah, as you see, Giles also has pitted onto those slick tires, so it's going to be interesting now. We've got the top 5 entering the pit lane. Now, I'd say top 6 as well if Charlie follows. So, Sophie, Jabril, Mercedes, Kai, Pedro, and Charlie all come into the pits. This is a crucial moment of the race. We see Midnight currently out on track on those Inter tires, and he's got Kirk behind him on the slicks. What is the positions going to be like here? We'll have to see what tire compounds they go on. Could it be half-half? Could it be all slicks?
Kirk, I've just joined Kirk. It started raining at the final corner. Kirk has slowed down tremendously and he's coming into the pits. So potentially if those wet weather drivers have gone onto slicks, it may struggle coming out of the pits. We didn't expect that for it to just downpour. That was some weird timing there potentially for some of the drivers. Obviously in the pits they might not have seen that it's downpoured since coming in, or potentially they saw that new wet weather front coming in, and I can see that Sophie's gone back onto the wets. We've got Midnight coming out, a few intermediate runners now, so I'm sorry, but maybe the slick runners as well, obviously bad timing for them. But yeah, very very interesting weather we're getting at Suzuka at the minute, Mac.
You can hear the rain pelting down as we're riding on board with Sophie there. It's getting to full wet conditions. You can see in the bottom left, Midnight is struggling for grip, side-by-side contact between the Ferrari and the Mclaren. It's a battle here. 4P1 wet weather tires versus Inters. Mercedes is on the intermediate tires. Midnight is also, but Mercedes are newer and fresher, so he managed to get up in P2. So the question is right now, Midnight did have that pace advantage. So he, even if he does pit right now, he will be better off than he was. But it's not the Waltz 2P1 that he would have wanted, unfortunately. Not managing to get further up in positions, but it would have benefited them at least a small bit.
Yeah, and obviously Kirk as well, managing to, while it was dry for just those, you know, few laps, he did manage to kind of catch the some of the drivers. So he put himself in a better position than what he did in that first stint. But yeah, obviously the drivers definitely saw something for those top 6. They definitely saw that wet weather incoming and decided that they needed some fresh set of weather to help them through the next few laps. So we've got Jabril on the back of Midnight here. Oh, Jabril very sideways in that 4GT, but making the move done. Potentially Midnight backing out of that to choose life, shall we say. But Midnight and Jabril making it through the Casio triangle, as well as Sophie and Mercedes. Sophie still in the lead after all that happened, which is quite impressive to say the least. But we've also got the likes of Pedro a little bit sideways after that final corner, but I'm just calling that normal BMW things from now on. But Kirk having a little bit of a tough time on those final few corners as well, which brings Italy on the back of that Dodge Viper, both looking very squirrely coming out of that corner. So, we may have had a potential retirement, Mac. The Dark Lord hasn't come out of the pits as yet. Obviously, we're still seeing him shown on those medium tyres and no fuel put in, so maybe the Dark Lord of retiring here.
Yeah, it does look like Dark Lord probably came off the worst out of all of those drivers that pitted up for the slicks one lap before the wet weather came back. So probably lost the most time out of any of the drivers that were on the slick tires. So unfortunate end to Dark Lord's race. But unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Someone has to benefit, someone has to lose in these situations. And unfortunately, just not Dark Lord's day today. As we see now, we've got Sophie leading the race, as you mentioned, still managing to keep the lead after all the conundrum that's happened. We see Mercedes with a 5-10 penalty on those inters, now starting to struggle in these heavy, wet conditions. We see Jibril catching up to the background. Let's say that Ford GT performing impeccably right now in this race, doing very well. Is going to be going back over to P2 just like he was potentially at the start of this race after the opening lap. I'm pretty sure he'll get past Mercedes now as there's this penalty. And Midnight under threat as well from Kai.
Oh, Charlie suffering from a little bit of lag again here, which is probably not easy for Nikki trying to guess where Charlie is. Charlie looks like he's trying to potentially make a move on Nikki, but maybe obviously Nikki not sure which way Charlie's going because of that lag issue. But yeah, obviously 100% agree with what you said about Jibril as well. Obviously, he's doing an impeccable job so far. I'm sure that practice during the wet series that Ziggy held has definitely, he's been able to put it into practice again here. And we all know how fast Jibril really is. But obviously, Mercedes coming off into P3. But yeah, obviously we've got the two Nighthawk admins and owner in Midnight and Pedro here, potentially battling it out in the next few laps, as all looked like they were going to touch a little bit there, but yeah, it looks like Pedro's having a little bit of a tough time in that BMW, swinging side to side.
Yeah, it looks like Midnight. I think Midnight probably maybe pitted a bit too early. I'd say there's a lot of tire wear on those inters, and you can see Mercedes is managing to keep P3 right now with the intermediate tires. Might be P4 soon enough, but is managing to keep it there with those tires. But I think those more worn tires for Midnight, because of those conditions that were happening just a bit earlier, has definitely been to his detriment, unfortunately, to see Pedro kicking up puddles of water there, heading into Degna 1. And now the race settled down once again. Will we have another dry spell for no reason at all? I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Mac, but I think obviously as a driver, when you get those really wet conditions and then it goes dry in a few laps, it's so hard to manage both kind of strategically and concentration as well, because obviously you're driving a certain way in the wet and then to swap it back to dry racing technically. It's difficult for a driver to switch back into those different modes lap after lap. So yeah, I don't know how you find that, Mac, but myself, I think the worst kind of driving conditions for me is when it goes wet dry.
No issue. No, I'm just messing. Yeah, no, definitely. It's like starting a whole new race, pretty much. It feels like you're doing a race on the softs and then doing a race on the hard tires. It's just like the car drives completely different. You feel like you're driving a different brand of car sometimes. You have to reset sometimes, and even especially if you're one of those drivers that does take the slick gamble, and if it does sometimes pay off, you have to basically be straight on it from the out lap, and you of course have to pay attention to where those wet lines are, because if you step onto one of those wet lines, you're going from maybe dry conditions to full wet again, and you just slide off into the barrier. So you have to. It's even harder than just going from a wet track to a slick track. You're going from a wet track to a slick line that has a wet track around it. It's very, very difficult. And sometimes it's just luck. Sometimes it's just luck, and then the other side is skill. It's a difficult game.
Yeah, it's a fine line for sure, because obviously we can see on the game, especially obviously when watching it for the commentary, it's like driving kind of a train when you're on the slicks in wet conditions, because you've got to keep to that dry line as much as possible, because if you deviate just a little bit, you know, you're unstable with a car, and you potentially got, you know, a very unstable car to manage. Obviously, I think Kirk was just about at the pits when the rain hit, so he didn't come off too badly, but obviously, like you say, Dark Lord pitting for the slicks just before the rain hit, it would have been a tough lap to get it back into the pits for sure. But yeah, I think obviously the driver's now trying to settle back into that wet weather that we're getting at the moment, but also we're getting kind of to that dark phase of the race as well, where it's kind of goes from late evening into you know, dark night, which we shall see soon probably. But in that last lap we also had Charlie go for a move on Nicky as well. We see Nicky having some better luck, shall we say, in the feature race than the sprint race. He seems to be doing a pretty good job so far. He's keeping himself to himself for the majority, but and engaging in a little bit of battles here and there. But I don't know about you, Matt, but we seem to be getting into that point of the race where everyone's a little bit spaced out, you know, they're settling in, especially after, you know, the weather we've had so far. But seems to be doing quite well so far, very impressive from all the drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just so enthralled by the heavy rain sounds there that just suddenly started when Mercedes, when we were riding on board with Mercedes going down that straight. Oh, suddenly the rain just got heavier, and it's going to be interesting to see, like, the standing water on the track keeps changing when these heavy rain showers come. But it's just a matter of, yeah, this is the point in the race where everyone's just kind of chilling on the track. They're doing their own thing. They're keeping it clean, and they're just going at their full potential all the time in these wet conditions. And it's just a matter of who's going to blink first, who might make that mistake that causes the position change, or even just who might struggle with pace towards the latter stages of these races. And just as I mentioned it, Kai, terrible mistake there into Dunlop's, spins off. I was mentioning at the start of this race, that corner is so difficult in the dry to keep that traction, and here it is in the wet. Kai spinning around. Oh dear.
Yeah, getting rear bumper damage with that incident as well. Midnight going a little bit wide here as well, but yeah, unfortunate for Kai. He seemed to be, I was going to say Kai seemed to be, you know, doing a little bit better after that first mistake that we saw during the race, but maybe that GTR is just not very kind to him in these wet weather conditions, and like you say, trying to put any traction down in that section is difficult in the dry, let alone the wet. So obviously unfortunate for Kai there, but potentially rear bumper damage might not cost him too much tucked up behind Midnight, but we shall see. It'll probably be the backstretch that we see that kind of damage inflict Kai's pace a little bit. But obviously a free position for Midnight there. I'm sure he's relatively happy. I mean, he'll be looking in his rearview mirror, seeing that very mean-looking GTR of Kai, who might be able to get back on Midnight here, going into this back straight and 130R. Yeah, the pace of that GTR just managed to put the accelerator just that little bit earlier than Midnight, so Midnight losing that position back to Kai here.
Yeah, no, I think the biggest crash I've probably ever had on GG7 was into Dunlop corner in the West. It's so easy to just get a bit too throttle happy and spin the tires, and then once you get onto the grass, there's not much helping you stop. I mean, the brakes, you're aquaplaning even with the brakes on. So yeah, no, just a mistake from riders. We see Sophie and Jibril side by side into the S's. Jibril managing to get up in a P1 ahead of the Ferrari driver. Interesting to see that change position. I'm not sure if Sophie made a mistake or if that was coming, if Jibril was catching up to the 458 driver, but there is a change position there. I was gonna say the 4GT not only looks hella cool with those LED lights, but also has a lot of pace here tonight with Jibril.
Yeah, looks cool. He's doing good. What can you say about that 4GT so far of Jibril? He seems to be, like, you know, just doing really well I think it stopped raining. I can't quite see. So
I think it has.
that 4GT kind of switches on, where obviously all the other drivers will be kind of again going through that difficult phase where it's completely stopped raining. Oh, as Midnight drifts around that corner there, going under the bridge, manages to hold it. So well done there, Midnight. But yeah, obviously going back to Jabril, he manages to switch on in that transition when it goes from wet to dry. So you'll see him probably generate a little bit of a gap between himself and Sophie, who looks like a little bit is under pressure by Mercedes, who's you know, he's been in those front row seats for that Jabril and Sophie fight, and he wants a bit of the action as well.
I do think a factor of it is it's not just the Jabril being great driving in the 4GT, but as well, I do know certain cars, even though we have Bop on, certain cars in these transition phases between the wet weather inter slash dry track conditions, they do have a bit of a disparity in how the car handles between them. I know from experience, the Mercedes is absolutely terrible when it transitions from wet to slightly less wet on the wet weather tires. And I think the 458 is one of those cars as well, where the car suddenly loses all handling once it gets below the kind of the threshold for a wet weather tire or an intermediate tire. And I think, as you see there, Sophie managing to get back ahead of Jabril. Is Jabril now starting to struggle with the car in these conditions? The 458 are back ahead of Jabril, and Mercedes now becoming a threat from behind, who's still on the intermediate tires, by the way. So his car is going to be coming alive at this stage as well.
Damn, he's looked after those intermediates perfectly. Little to nowhere for Mercedes there. And talking about tyres, Midnight coming in for a pit stop there. So we'll see what tyres he goes on for. Could he maybe go for the slicks? Maybe it might be a bit too early, but we shall see. Obviously that moisture bar going up and down, especially when drivers going over those curves. But I don't know if you agree, Mac. The battle for especially the top three positions has been quite interesting so far, but quite a lot of fun as well.
I mean, not only that, I just saw another person go on the slicks, and it's none other than Midnight. Midnight has taken the gamble once again to go onto the slick tires. He's very fine to go on the inters, now he's onto the slick tires. He's a man of gambling today.
He has picked up a 3-second penalty as Midnight, so potentially maybe losing a little bit of grip as he come out of the pits on the very wet pit exit. So it might not cost him too much, especially if the track is ready for the slick tyres again. We see that moisture bar just kind of hanging around at that 1/3, so it's on the bubble, as he would say. But obviously, kind of at the top, we've still got these top runners either running on wets or intermediates. So we'll see if they've seen a Midnight's strategic call there, and maybe potentially go for a similar call here as they come around the final corners. Will they go for another lap, or will any of these come in for some tyres? Looks like Sophie's going to come in for some tyres, and she's the only one out of the top three that come in to the pits. So has she seen what Midnight's done and potentially think the track is ready for the slicks?
This top three battle is going to be so exciting to watch. I mean, we've got completely split strategy. We've got Mercedes on inters, and then Jabril and Sophie on the wet tyres. And I think we'll have to see now what Sophie goes on to. Does she go on to the inters, or does she go on to the slicks? But I think we can waiver Midnight's penalty just for his confidence. I think he's just because of his mad confidence. I think we should waiver it because he's. Yeah. I respect him for taking the gamble onto the mediums, which may or may not work out. We'll find out soon enough. But up at the front now, we'll see Sophie coming out in P7 on the medium tyres. So just like Midnight coming out in those mediums, she comes out ahead of Midnight in the McLaren. As we see now, Mercedes, a swap of position. Mercedes overtaking Jabril, but getting onto the curb there a small bit, which is in the heavyweight conditions, because the curb is holding a lot of water around this track. So nearly losing the position there again to the 4GT driver, but still managing to stay ahead. But you can see there, see what I mean by the wet line. You can see more water being kicked up at certain points because Mercedes drifting onto that like heavy wet line from the current dry line. As we see now, that meter in the bottom left, it's getting below the threshold for dry conditions.
Yeah, so Sophie taking that gamble just a little bit earlier than Mercedes and Jabril. Maybe we might see them come in, but Jabril obviously taking on the curbs a lot there, which I don't know if it was the right call there, as it's let Mercedes go just a little bit. But obviously, if they come into a pit stops, that's kind of squashed. But Pedro doing quite well at the minute. Obviously running P3. He's kind of had a what would you call it? Kind of, I don't know, not a lonely race, but a race where he's just kept himself to himself. He's made a couple of moves, but he's done a pretty good job. He's not gotten any trouble, as we would say. He's just kind of getting the job done, and seems to be running quite high in that BMW, which is a very difficult car to drive in these conditions. But he has also come into the pits potentially for those medium tyres or some slicks. So has Kaden the guy. So they've seen obviously the top three come in, and they want to copy what they've done. As we see Sophie coming around the final corners, she is behind Nikki. But what position will she get after these people have come out of the pits? She might reclaim the lead potentially, although Charlie has got the lead currently, but he is a pit stop down, shall we say. So potentially Sophie in the net lead here, and making the right call to go on those mediums a lap earlier.
Yeah, I mean, that just shows the power of pitting that lap earlier when it gets to those different conditions. I mean, that is a massive gap that Sophie's after pulling ahead of the rest of those drivers. Like, Jabril manages to come out ahead of Kai, which is interesting. Or sorry, Mercedes.
Yeah, and Mercedes.
Sorry. Yeah. So it looks like, I think Mercedes and Kai might have taken on a bit more fuel. Are they predicting that it's going to go back to wet weather, as in Jabril's predictions going back to wet weather, so he's not going to take too much fuel? Or is it Kai predicting it's going to stay dry? We'll have to find out. But yeah, it looks like Midnight, right on the tail of Kai. Midnight, who literally pitted the earliest out of any of the drivers, is now right on the tail of the Nissan driver.
Yeah, obviously, if the race does kind of finish under these sort of conditions, will Midnight be able to get those mediums kind of 12-ish, 13 laps? We shall see. Obviously, Katie the guy having maybe just slightly, ever so slightly fresher rubber might help him in those closing stages of the race. But yeah, it's good to see these two battling it out on track as we get into that very dark night phase. It's good to see cars racing in the night sometimes. You don't get to see it quite a lot, but all the cars, looking pretty good in the dark. But we have had I believe, Giles retired quite a few laps ago, and we have lost Kirk as well due to a retirement or a DNF. So we've got 9 runners so far. Obviously, Sicily rounding out the grid, the running grid so far. So good to see him, still going. I've not driven much in that Lexus, so I'm not quite sure how it's handled the doom and gloom conditions and those, the wet to the dry. It seems to be doing okay. Maybe not Sicily's preferred kind of conditions to drive in, but I'd say all in all, I'm very impressed by the drivers. They've handled the different weather conditions pretty well. As we see, I believe Charlie coming in, that promotes Sophie back up into the lead, and Pedro managed to get a quite a good deal, shall we say, out of that last pit stop as he jumped Mercedes in the pits.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I mean, that means Pedro's strategy paying off. But the question is, did take less fuel? We know Jabril and Pedro did take less fuel, so we'll have to see if they're going to make it to the end on that fuel. I mean, of course, we've got some very good fuel conservers. I mean, you can see there Mercedes with a lot of fuel, Pedro with about, I'd say, 75%. So we'll have to see. Oh, we see Jabril spinning off ahead in the Ford GT. Out of P2 with front end damage, yellow flag into Degna 2. That is not good for the 4GT driver. It's just so tricky. I could tell as soon as that 4GT went wide onto that wet line, it was all grip lost and straight spun round. Gonna rejoin in P4. That's so unfortunate. He was leading such a good race and just making a small mistake there. Pedro up into P2 and Mercedes into P3.
Yes. So unfortunate for Jabril there. He was doing a stellar job up until that point, and like you say, it's just so easy to unstable the car, picking up a little bit of wet on the the slicks or going on the curbs, and like you say, the 4GT especially, it definitely didn't like that corner that Jabril went off. But hopefully, you know, Jabril can still finish quite strong and pick up a haul of points, and you know, just goes to show how fast Jabril really is and has been during this race. So, you know, I think he should definitely take that, you know, under his belt. But we're not over just yet. We've got about 11 laps to go. So, potentially, if a new kind of weather front comes in or another round of pit stops, potentially that might see Jabril promoted back up onto the podium again. But that will promote Pedro into P2 and Mercedes P3. Yeah, unfortunate for Jabril there. And it seems Midnight has lost a little bit of time from KD the Kai here, and Charlie coming out of the pits just in front of KD the Kai. So Charlie getting the better end of the deal there as well, jumping KD the Kai out on track. That might have been potentially, obviously, KD the Kai had to repair that damaged rear bumper. But obviously quite early probably to tell, but or probably to discuss. But if you had to, at the moment, who would you call as driver of the day as we're getting into that kind of last stint of the race?
I mean, before I mention that, shout out Charlie, who's after coming out in P5 or after these round of pit stops. I mean, like, that is some strategy. I mean, now, questionable tire choice. It's on the soft tires. I'm not sure if they're going to make it to the end, but we'll find out. But I'd say driver of the day, I have to say, I was rooting for pretty much every driver on the grid, because I mean, there's been some really good performances today. But I have to say, I think Sophie, right now, if I was to call it, had to be driver of the day. I mean, that 458 just took off after that first lap, and while she's had a few challenges over the race, dealt with them all, still in P1, has had to pit twice with differing strategies across the grid, has managed to come out on top both times.
Yeah, she's doing an epic job today, and I know she likes the wet weather, so I'm sure she was very happy, you know, on the calendar that we had, you know, these conditions around Suzuka. Because last season as well, kind of, I think it was the final couple of rounds that we had wet weather, she just excelled at. So she's back in her element again here with the the doom and gloom conditions, as we call them today. But yeah, obviously she's got quite a huge gap to herself, and she goes a little bit wide there though. She's got a huge gap between herself and Pedro, so she could probably chill to the end. But knowing Sophie, she's not going to. She's going to pump, you know, fast lap after fast lap in if she can. But yeah, maybe a bit too early to call driver of the day. But I'm also kind of you know, heading towards Sophie for just, you know, keeping the lead, especially after such difficult conditions that we have. And obviously, visibility-wise, now you can definitely tell that some of the drivers are going to struggle, especially with those some of the headlights and should we say the lack of light around this track. Not a lot of kind of street lighting or track lighting here, so it's going to be interesting to see how the drivers get on in these kind of final 9 laps or so. But yeah, just having a quick flick through, Jabril's not too far off of Mercedes, but the fellow 4GT driver in Charlie is closing on Jabril, so we may potentially see a move here.
Yeah, just to mention as well, Charlie's of course on the fast compound, on those soft tires. They're definitely going to provide some more grip in these kind of like damp conditions. So, and also holding the fastest lap right now of the race, so just showing that those soft tires are definitely excelling. But there is a good bit of wear on those softs, and you have to question, if it was kind of wet conditions, it would help cool the soft tires, which would help reduce the wear. But I'm not sure. We've got nearly 9 laps to go in this race. We'll just have to see, can Charlie conserve those tires, or if we get a bit more rain, might help with kind of slowing down the wear on the medium or the soft tires. We'll see there now.
Yeah, that might be a bit cool for the drivers. Obviously having a bit of slick running to then having a downpour again. I'm sure a lot of the drivers are trying to, you know, do the opposite of the rain dance, I suppose. You know, if they see any sort of wet weather front coming in on their radar, they're probably trying to blow it away. Because I'm sure after, you know, those first couple of stints, as we see Jabril going a little bit wide into that wet weather patch, or the wet track. So yeah, obviously very close for Jabril there. But yeah, going back to my original point, got a little bit sidetracked by Jabril there. I'm sure the drivers are, I'm not going to say enjoying the running on the slicks, but I think obviously in the slicks you can kind of, I guess, tone it down a little bit. So you don't have to concentrate just as much. So obviously after the kind of the difficult conditions we had on the first couple of stints, I'm sure the drivers are really, you know, enjoying this. I'd say kind of in the middle conditions at the minute. It's not 100% dry, but it's not obviously wet. But obviously the 4GTs still together, and we've got Katie the Kai right on the tail of the two, so potentially looking to jump both of the 4GTs in the next couple of corners, Mac.
Yeah, Katie the Kai setting the fastest lap by only 0.04 of a second faster than Charlie. You can see closing up on the back of the two 4GTs. Really interesting to see how far Kai can go. Will he be able to get a podium at this rate? We've got 8 laps to go. Of course, the here is quite bunched together. Of course, we got Charlie and Kyle within about 2 seconds of each other. But then there's a bit of a gap there to Mercedes, so we'll have to see if he can close that gap. I'd say about 5 seconds to Mercedes up in front in the Porsche. So we'll see if Kai can get clear the 4GTs quick enough, if he can, and get up to Mercedes. See Mercedes in the sector there. Everyone's trading faster laps as the track is nearly fully dry now. But we can't neglect to, you know, predict the worst and say, you know, this could all not matter if a rain shower, as you mentioned, comes with the 5 laps there. It'd be quite cruel, but anything can happen. I mean, we've seen the rain come out of nowhere in the past few laps. I mean, anything can happen, as I mentioned, and we'll just have to be watching out for it and see if it does come.
Yeah, I'm sure the drivers will be kind of crossing everything they can that the wet weather won't come in the last kind of 7 laps that we have. But you never know, like you say, anything could happen, especially around this track, and especially after what we saw earlier. But yeah, it seems that the Jabril managing to hold off Charlie, and Charlie managing to hold. Well, I say Charlie managing to hold off Katie the Kai. Again, a little bit of a lag issue from Charlie there. Temporarily teleporting to a different postcode, which probably took Katie the Kai a little bit by surprise there. But it's good to see these three, you know, back in a little bit of a battle. Although Charlie is struggling a little bit with lag, so that might be throwing Katie the Kai off a little bit. Hence why I think Katie the Kai gave Charlie a little bit of a flash there, just to tell him, you know, I am behind you, sort of thing. But we may potentially see a move here. Katie the Kai nearly able to go side by side with Charlie there, but not quite. But what was that? It looked like that's the Dark Lord. I've just seen the Dark Lord re-emerge from the pits, I believe. Yes, he's running on track just behind City. That's an interesting one, Mac.
I'd say fastest lap.
Potentially.
Probably. I'd say fastest lap point just to. I mean, technically, if he does come back on the track in these last few moments of the race, I don't think there's anything stopping him from saying, "Oh, I wasn't retired. I was just sitting in the pit lane for like 15 laps." So he could be taking the points for P11 and fastest lap. I mean, not a bad idea. Every point counts in the championship, so that's the strategy. Then that's how play ball, I guess.
Interesting one. Interesting one for sure. Obviously, he has to finish in the top 10 to get the fastest lap, so he's got a little bit of a mission on his hands. But all I want to say is kind of insert the "I have awoken" meme there for the Dark Lord. He's seen that the track is pretty much dry, bone dry, and he wants to, you know, challenge for the fastest lap. But like I say, got a little bit of a challenge to catch. Obviously, Giles, who pitted. I don't know how many laps.
He was only a few laps after Kai. I think he has time to 12, so he only has 2 laps then to get to past him. So yeah, he will get the fastest lap point.
Can do that.
Oh, as
Do
long as
that
he stays up for
funny.
2 laps, hopefully he doesn't disconnect or anything.
Just go
Oh,
boom out of nowhere.
yeah.
But Nicky and Sidley running in P9 and P8, having a quiet race.
Whoa!
Whoa!
Jabril having a bit of a moment there. I'd say doing the exact same thing that caused him to spin out earlier, touching the curb that has still a lot of standing water on it, kicking out the rear of the car, and it lets Kai get straight by. The 4 GTs now in the rearview mirror of Kai. We'll see if Jabril is able to mount a challenge again on the Nissan GTR driver, but I'm not sure if it's going to be happening. He does have that front end damage still, which is going to affect straight line speed since it is now dry conditions. We can now get up to those top speeds that we weren't able to in the wet. He's onto the wet patch again. You can see they're drifting wide. You see lost all grip in the car and just not getting the exit because of that. Now puts him at risk of an overtake from his fellow comrade in the 4GT, Charlie.
Yeah, I was surprised that Jabril managed to catch that. That was a very close call there from Jabril. Definitely probably a Code Brown moment there for him. But he's not out of contention just yet. He's in the middle of the sandwich at the moment between KD the Kai and Charlie. Although Charlie is coming into the pits, so you're right. The softs aren't going to last him to the end. Potentially he's going to go here for another set of softs, which might drop him out of that little battle he was in with Jabril and KD the Kai.
I don't know if I'm like seeing things, but do Charlie and Jabril have different colors on the lights of the car? Like, because it looks like Charlie is green and Jabril has like blue or something. I don't know if it's just my eyes are like broken. I'm not sure if that's a customization like thing that you can do. Look, Charlie is like green. Oh, sorry, it's reflecting the paint. That's what it is. I was wondering because it looks green, and I was like, it looks so different, and I was like, oh, it's reflecting the paint. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
I'd say that would have been cool if we could customize the LED colours on the cars.
Yeah.
I admit especially the LEDs on the 4GTs, they look cool in these night races. They've got kind of this LED strip in the windscreen as well. I don't know if that would put me off while I'm racing or if I find that, pretty cool. I'm not quite sure there, but it looks like I was just on board with Cicely. It looks like Sophie may have just been able to lap Cicely, so she's on fire at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Pedro trailing behind. I do think Pedro's closed the gap a small bit, but is still Sophie leading out in front. I'd say that gap quite big. I'm not sure if Pedro will be able to close that unless a dash of pace comes soon enough. Charlie's actually coming out of the pits at P7. I'll be chasing out Midnight. So like maybe that was a strategy from Charlie to go on those soft tires and then come out. I mean, he was in P6 anyways. And if he wasn't able to get ahead of Jabril, would have stayed P6. So if we can get past Midnight, that would be still P6, and he'll at least still have the tires at the end to complete the race, and might be able to get a fast lap as well.
Oh, yeah, maybe he wanted to poke the bear of Midnight and say, engage in a fight with me in these last couple of laps, which I'm sure Midnight probably doesn't want right now. He's had a bit of kind of a quiet race himself, having to save that McLaren a few times as he goes a little bit wide on the AstroTurf there in the Casio triangle and kind of yeets himself off, which lets Charlie have pretty kind of free reins on that move there, and Midnight diving into the pits potentially for a last minute pit stop and maybe the fastest lap attempt.
Well, the tables have been turned because Jabril has just come out of the pit lane right alongside Charlie. I did not see Jabril pitting, but it looks like he has onto those soft tires. Did he feel threatened by the new tires of Charlie for that fast lap point? We'll have to find out after the race, but that means now that Jabril is behind Charlie and Charlie now gets back on a P5 again. It's an interesting strategy choice.
Yeah, and I'm sure Charlie didn't even expect that himself, probably. He probably thought all the drivers around, pretty set in their ways. They weren't going to come into the pits again. So he gets promoted up a few positions. Not he can't complain about that, can he? As the Midnight comes out in P7, a few corners in front of Sicily. And I think it was Nikki, actually. I picked the wrong driver earlier. It was Sophie overtook Nikki for the lapping part of that I was saying earlier. But yeah, obviously the fellow GT, the 4 GT runners back together again. A true romance story, shall we say. But yeah, it seems to be that Charlie has definitely got some pace here around Suzuka, but so has Jabril. So it'll be interesting to see what order these two finished. Obviously, I want a good result from for Jabril here, especially after the first couple of stints. He just showed how kind of good he was in the wet weather, and obviously that one mistake cost him quite a lot. As we see Mercedes also in the pits with 4 laps left to go. Is that another runner that's going to pit last minute pit for the softs and potentially go for the fastest lap, or just a little bit of fun on the soft tyres?
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, it's just interesting. I'm surprised that the Mercedes is pitting. I mean, he's got enough fuel to go to the end. It just seems like a bit of an unnecessary gamble. I mean, if he was to go onto the wet line and spin off, you'd have a lot less leniency with your gap to the drivers behind. But we'll have to see. I mean, might be defending that fast lap point, as you said, but left. I mean, yeah. I mean, would you prefer losing points because you've crashed and dropped positions, or get 1 point? You know, it's that's just the decision you have to make. 2 points.
Yeah, and Katie the car going for a big drift under here, going under the bridge, manages to catch it. Obviously, he's kind of in no man's land at the minute. There's no one in front of him in touching distance, no one behind him at the moment, so he was able to kind of make that drift. Maybe looking for some star points there as Katie the Kite as he's up into P3. Obviously good for him because he had quite a difficult kind of first half of the race. Obviously we saw him make that kind of big mistake around, I can't remember the name of the corner, but it was a corner you were saying, Mac. Obviously it's hard to put traction down in the dry, let alone the wet, so it's good to see him back up in the podium spot after that incident he had earlier. Checking in with the 4 GT drivers again. Still Charlie P5, Jabril P6, and yeah, it seems we're getting to that closing stage of the race here, Mac. It's a bit. I think Sophie is definitely, with the pace she's got, going to win it. But I was going to say, I think the podium positions are pretty much set in stone. It's all the positions behind that are not at the minute.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, Kai and Pedro and Sophie have been just keeping a consistent gap for this entire last bit of the race. I'd say, you know, they could probably cruise it a bit home now and avoid any risk, and still probably keep podium positions. So I'd say they won't be taking any unnecessary risks towards the end of this race. As for the drivers behind, however, I can't say the same, as we have, of course, an ongoing fight between Charlie and Jabril, the two 4 GT drivers, who will be attempting to swap positions potentially. Jabril will want that P5, will want those extra few points for himself, as Charlie will try and defend the 4 GT, fellow 4 GT driver.
Yeah, and Charlie also has got the 2 extra points for the fastest lap at the minute as well. So he's managed definitely to kind of switch that pace on now, and he's gone purple again on lap 28 with some quite warm soft, shall we say. So potentially we might see kind of the fast lap pinging here, there and everywhere for a couple of the drivers. But yeah, Charlie doing a remarkable job to keep Jabril at bay at the moment, as Jabril got a little bit more of a better exit, potentially going side by side here for the hairpin, although Jabril backs out slightly. But they're gonna go side by side through here. Who's gonna put the power down early and get the better exit? Looks like Jabril slightly got the better exit over Charlie, so we may see a position swap here, and we do. But Charlie's not backing out of it just yet, as we about to go through the spoon corner. So will we see a late braking move from Charlie? No, we're going to see him wait behind Jabril. But interesting battle between these two. Obviously, for quite a few laps it was the opposite way around, but good to see Jabril making a move on Charlie there.
Charlie will have the slipstream down the back stretch now to potentially launch an overtake into 130, or it's going to be side by side between the two 4 GTs. It's not anymore though, because Charlie backs out, maybe waiting for better overtaking opportunity. Of course, Charlie has got that fast lap. He's showing that pace. So it could have been just a momentary mistake for Charlie. and may have the better pace overall. We'll have to find out as soon as they're heading out of the last curve now onto the main straight. Just Charlie after dropping back a small bit, maybe not getting the best exit out of the Castro Triangle. Heading into turn 1 now. A bit hard to overtake around this track sometimes. It's very hard to keep your flow when you've got a driver in front of you, especially heading through the chicane Castro Triangle and trying not to cause any incident into the high-speed corner 130R. It's kind of, it's hard to go side by side in 130R with a GR3 car in the first place. And then Castro Triangle as well, very easy to outbrake yourself. So you kind of, a lot of the time, I find myself braking a bit too early, trying to make sure the driver ahead is has plenty of clearance, make sure there's no contact. But quite hard to follow through that last sector.
And obviously, the driver's having to be still a little bit careful. They're not able to kind of use the full track as well as the curbs. The curbs are quite wet. I think I saw, I can't remember if it was Jabril or Charlie touched the curbs even slightly, and it still had quite a few puddles on there. So, like you say, just even making it even harder for Charlie to pick an overtaking spot here. So, it was quite brave from Jabril managing to get that move done just outside of the hairpin. Obviously, Charlie's got about a lap and a half, I'd say, to try and reclaim that P5. But as it also Mercedes picking up that 2 fastest lap points with a 2-minute flat .447. So we're nearly at the 2-minute flat here as he goes purple again in that third sector. We're going to go round. We go slightly wide though, just before that Castro Triangle. Might cost him a little bit of time, but we may also see him go 2 minutes flat as well as we are on to the final lap with the top 3.
Yeah, I think some of the drivers starting to run out of petrol now. I think Pedro was looking a bit low on fuel, or should make it to the end, but there's a few drivers that are really getting down to the wire with the fuel that they have in the car. As we see, Derek Lord still out on track. He's pitted again, as he's got a pretty new looking sauce. I think definitely going for that fastest lap attempt. We'll see if they do end up claiming it. Now, Sophie out in front here. Can't even see second position in the background. That's how dominant of a race it's been for the Ferrari 458 driver. Rounding the hairpin now and heading into 200R. It's really been a fantastic showing from her, and I think definitely one of her best performances in F1 RST. Has been absolutely dominant throughout all the pit stops, all the change position, ever since really lap 1.
Yeah, and it's definitely rare for a driver in such difficult conditions to make minimal mistakes. I don't think we've even really seen her make any mistakes. Maybe a few slight ones, but nothing major. So that's definitely a race that Sophie should be really proud of. Her performance has been impeccable. But we join her for the last couple of corners here. If you want to run through it with her, Mac.
We heading into the Castro Triangle now. 1 corner away from victory, and Sophie is going to take the feature race here at Suzuka in Season 4. An absolutely brilliant win from the 458 driver. We've got Pedro coming in second position. Quite a quiet race from him, but definitely lurking there in the background and managing to pick up a brilliant podium position. We got Dark Road following behind him, not taking the fastest lap, unfortunately, as Kai will round the final corner in the Super to take P3. Sorry, not the Super. Mercedes coming home in the Porsche, because why would he be in a Mercedes? In P4. We got Jabril in the 4GT with his fellow 4GT driver behind Charlie, coming on in P5 and P6. We got Midnight as well in the McLaren. Been quite a race with a few gambles and low fuel mode. Not really paying off, unfortunately, for him in the end. You see the fuel really coming down to the wire there. I thought he was in low fuel mode because I actually can't even see if there's any fuel left in the bottom left.
It might be fumes.
Yeah, there you go. It's cut out now. So Midnight will be coming home in P7, Cicely in P8, and Nikki in P9. A very interesting race there, Sarah, and one full of action.
Yeah, definitely one for the books, for sure. Obviously, going from wet to dry to back to wet, then to fully dry. It's and obviously the darkness of the night as well, catching a few drivers out. it's been one hell of a race, and I mean, what can we say about the top three especially? I think Sophie having an impeccable race, Pedro having a quiet race to start with, but it just goes to show sometimes a quiet race can pay off, and it definitely has for him in this race. I think he deserved that P2. He's had a bit of a challenging few tracks in round 2 and round 3, so it's good to see that he's doing well now, and especially obviously Katie the Kai after making that quite major mistake earlier. Good to see. It just goes to show in these sort of conditions never to give up, really, because at one moment you think your race is ruined, next minute you're on the podium.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this race has thrown so many spanners in the works for multiple drivers, but they handled it like champs. There's been some excellent performances from everybody. I think everybody can give themselves a pat on the back for finishing the race and just surviving it all.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I've really enjoyed watching the two Ford GTs as it's raining on their coming in lap. It was temporarily raining, so I'm sure the drivers are thankful that it wasn't raining on their last lap, and it's having a little bit of a shower now. But going back to my original point, I battled it out for the majority of the race. I think we've seen it once before, but this race, obviously, for sure, we definitely saw them battle out quite a bit, and you can pretty much see the respect that they have for for each other. They were giving each other a lot of room, a lot of respect around some of the corners. So yeah, I enjoyed watching that battle as well. Sicily, kind of Nikki had a bit of a quiet race, a bit of difficult conditions, especially in the cars that they're driving. But it was good to see them, still running, still picking up valuable points that will help them out in the latter stage of the championship. So I think for sure it was a race that all the drivers put definitely a lot of effort into, a lot of concentration. So they all deserve the points that they're getting, and very, very impressed, very proud of them all, as it wasn't an easy race by any means. But before we obviously hear from some of the drivers away on the podium, has the last couple of laps swayed your driver of the day decision, or are you still sticking with your original choice, Mac?
I'm sticking with my original choice, to be honest. I think I've already said it in the closing speech for the last lap. I mean, he's just been absolutely dominant. I don't think I've seen as dominant of a performance like in any of the races I've commentated so far in the season. I think it's definitely the first one where I've seen from start to finish, was just absolutely on it the whole time, no mistakes at all. So I think definitely Sophie driver of the day for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to agree with you there. Again, like I said as well, making minimal mistakes, and yeah, just bossing it really in that race. It seemed that the Ferrari and Sophie, the pair, doing a pretty awesome job, and managing to hold obviously P1 as well. It looked like she may have lost it a few times to Jibril, but she definitely fought it out, and coming home on the top spot of the podium, I'm sure she'll be very happy about that. But obviously I think there's a few honourable mentions as well. Pedro in that P2 and Katie Lekai in P3. And to be fair, probably Mercedes and Jibril as well. So there's quite a few honourable mentions for the driver of the day. But yeah, I've got to agree with you. Sophie definitely deserves it for this one. And obviously she definitely likes the wet weather. Unfortunately, we may not see it for the rest of the championship. We may, because obviously the random weather on some of the tracks, it may give us the delight of some wet weather, as it did in Fuji for the Blue Lobby drivers. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all the drivers get on around Deep Forest next. See a track that may be hard to overtake and make some moves. Definitely kind of a challenging one for the drivers. But yeah, next up, obviously, it's a double stop at the Deep Forest, the normal layout and the reverse layout. So we'll head over to the podium room, see if any of the drivers have anything they want to say about their race, and then we'll see you for Deep Forest. But thank you, Mac, for providing some excellent commentary to this race. Hopefully you enjoyed as well. I know I definitely enjoyed watching this race tonight.
Yeah, it was very good. I had a lot of fun commentating, and I have to say, Deep Forest is going to be an interesting one. I think I've raced on that track maybe like 2 times in my life, and it was pretty fun both times. So it'll be interesting to see, especially considering, I like to say it's a street circuit. So, or well, like it's kind of a street circuit. So, you know, it's probably the closest you get to maybe Monaco in Gran Turismo 7. So it'll be hard to overtake, but there's those long straights that will definitely provide a good bit of slipstreaming, and I can't wait to see what it's going to look like for the sprint race, especially at the start. With that rolling start, seeing everybody slipstreaming down the straight, but we'll see anyways. But yeah, good fun. And let's head to the podium room now to hear from some of the drivers.
Sprint race was a little crazy for the first few laps. After a little spin, I had a great battle with Kirk, and I finally managed to pass him coming into the penultimate lap. I'm happy with P5, but it could have been a podium. The feature race went much better. I qualified up near the front, and then with the Ferrari's lightning starts, I managed to split the front row and lead into turn 1. After that, it was a case of managing the gap behind and paying close attention to the weather radar. I am super happy to get my first feature win in Red Lobby. More rain races than I could challenge the quick guys for the championship.
Okay, so round 4 at Suzuka, and that was a very good run, I think. Starting off with qualifying, just getting that P2 is really good. I was in P1 for a considerable amount of time in the session, which quite shocked me a bit, because I'm not usually known for being very quick in qualifying. But yeah, still getting that P2 feels really good. And yeah, I finally managed to get a clean set of laps in qualifying, and I think it really showed in that result. Then in the sprint, I always struggle to get through the pack, and this track proved to be especially difficult to overtake. But getting that P3, especially right at the end, felt incredible. Obviously making that move on Louis, which I have to give props to, because he's a clean, respectful, and he's always very aware of what's going on. He's got really good racecraft. So it was a high-risk move, and if it wasn't for him having all those qualities, we probably would have crashed, or it would have ended quite badly. So yeah, I knew it was a high-risk move. I tried to make everything cleanly, but yeah, it paid off in the end. And then in the feature, I did get a good initial getaway off the line, but I misshifted into third gear and got swarmed by the pack into turn 1, which could have been quite costly. But then, yeah, managed to control everything from then on. I'm still not very comfortable with this car in the wet conditions, especially in heavy rain. It was unfortunate that obviously the weather in GT7 is a bit inconsistent, but still we got a good amount of rain, I'd say, and it made it quite challenging. I think strategically I did all the right calls, I guess, which it obviously is really good. I needed that kind of boost of confidence as well in these conditions, considering how the last wet races have been for me. But yeah, it still wasn't great. Still lacking a lot of confidence in the car, and obviously in the transition from wet to dry conditions, I'm still quite nervous, and yeah, it's not easy at times to manage. Obviously, you want to be as cautious as possible, but obviously trying to be as quick as possible as well. I think Sophie was pretty much out of reach throughout the entire race. She did everything brilliantly. And still to be able to finish on the podium, considering all the circumstances, and especially in P2, feels really good. Haven't been very lucky with how things have gone in past events, but yeah, finally managed to get a clean set of races and laps, and Yeah, it's pretty good. Hopefully this trend keeps going for the upcoming races, and yeah, I'm already looking forward to the next one.